This is Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance at our Capitol Bureau in Sacramento. We are joined by Maienschein. He is a member of the California State Assembly. And, sir, you recently played a pivotal role in the bipartisan agreement regarding the managed care organization tax package. It's inside baseball, but it's important. Explain what the issue was before we get to the particulars.
Sure. So what happened was there is an MCO tax, which is a tax on health plans. It's essentially a pass-through tax in that the federal government reimburses the plans, and it's used to cover Medi-Cal patients. And the Obama administration changed the rules.
This is through the Affordable Care Act.
Correct. They changed the rules a little bit, and so California had about $1.3 billion from the federal government that was at risk.
But be specific. I mean, it really was. This was not a game of chicken. The federal government was very clear. Unless you change the way you tax health plans, you're losing $1.3 billion every single year.
Absolutely.
And what did we do? And what did they want us to do?
So here's the good news, is we came up with a plan that really is a credit to really everybody who worked on it. Democrats, Republicans, and the Brown administration.
But before we talk about the grand compromise, which is important, just kind of give us the very basics. What did we do and what needed to be done?
So what the Obama administration essentially, it's a little more complicated, but what they essentially said is, look, you can't kind of pick winners and losers. It's got to be more across the board.
In terms of what health care plans you tax.
Exactly.
And as I understand it, Brian, what we were doing is we were only taxing plans that got Medicaid funding, is that right? Sort of?
Sort of. Okay. It really was, I think, a mess. Whether, the new rules from the federal government were great probably is open for discussion. Having said that, those were the rules that the state of California had to comply with.
So let's talk about the challenges you faced. You're a member of the Republican caucus, and the Republican caucus, for decades, is queasy about anything that increases taxes. And there's no question that this could be spun in a way that suggests it's a tax increase.
So here's the good news on this. We actually took something, it started out, there was going to be about a $600 million tax increase. The end result that the Democrats, the Republicans, and Governor Brown signed off on was a $100 million tax cut. So the good news was, and that's why it got bipartisan support, was it wasn't a tax increase. In fact, it was a tax cut. The great thing about this deal was, A, there's a tax cut, good for everybody. B, the $1.3 billion from the federal government our state is going to get now. Very important.
But let me ask you about the tax cut. I'm just going to play the other side for a second. It is a tax cut, but it's a tax cut on health insurance companies. And, one could argue, they don't need a tax cut. We need a tax cut. But does, these mega medical corporations...
Here's why. Because of the tax cut, premiums will go down as opposed to going up.
Will they, though?
I think so.
I mean,
yeah.
There is some skepticism generally on the question of premiums.
Let's look at it this way. There's a much better chance they will go down with a tax cut than with a tax increase. And secondly, look, it's part of negotiating and trying to get Republicans, Democrats, and the Brown administration on board. Everybody's got to come together and compromise a little bit. On the Republican side, to get a tax cut is significant, by the way, instead of a tax increase. I think everybody cared about that $1.3 billion, not forfeiting that.
How important was it for your caucus, and the Democrats presumably as well, that the California Chamber of Commerce supported the MCO deal, and Howard Jarvis went neutral?
I think it was important. I think it was important because there are groups that are respected for being, kind of on the side of taxpayers, if you will. And I think those were important endorsements.
Let me ask you. I understand you were the point person on the Assembly side for the Republicans. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. I mean, I assume that means you got to be with the governor, you got to be with the speaker. I mean,
it was a good experience. I enjoyed working with the governor. Governor Brown's definitely interesting.
Tell me. I mean, just amongst us.
No one's watching.
But what was that like?
He was really good to work with. Knowledgeable. understood the parameters as to how this deal needed to get made.
Let me ask you, at the time, the speaker was Tony Atkins.
Yeah.
Now, you and Tony are old friends because you both served on the San Diego City Council together. So I have to think that relationship was invaluable.
It helped. There's no question. And it was funny because she and I would joke, here we are, we both live in San Diego. We've spent a decade negotiating with one another, working with one another. It's like we were now in Sacramento doing the same thing we had done for years and years.
So did you have friends on the Senate side as well that were part of that, or was it negotiations were they going on?
I think they were a little bit separate. I do. I think they're their own body and their own institution, and I was more focused on what can we do in the Assembly. The Assembly side of it, kind of the Senate wasn't. I felt like any of my responsibility, whatever good, bad, or indifferent happened there.
Here's what's interesting. So in the Assembly, in order to get the 2/3, which is what you needed, 3 Republicans needed to vote in favor. 11 voted in favor. Whereas in the Senate, they needed 1 and they got 2.
Yeah.
So, sir, I mean, you got this running away.
Thanks.
Running away.
I think it was something because the deal was so good. I mean, I think people understood it. On the Assembly side, really understood it and saw that this was going to be something that was hugely beneficial.
But let's talk about the deal as well. In addition to the tax cut that you mentioned, this was very interesting to me. Even before the whole MCO deal, the Republicans, I get your press releases all the time from the caucus. The question of funding for developmentally disabled seemed to be really important to the Republicans.
Yeah.
I found that interesting, and so maybe that was kind of effective strategy because you knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But you got $300 million for services for developmentally disabled. A specific priority of your caucus in the Assembly was $120 million for certain nursing care facilities that were cut.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, so
that was a big deal. We got, and actually the number ended up being really closer to about $400 million.
Okay.
And for the developmentally disabled community, and that was a big deal. So of the kind of 1.3 billion that's coming from the federal government, nearly a third of that's going to go to the developmentally disabled community, and that was significant for a lot of people, myself included.
Why? I mean, I know you have a long history working with homeless. That's not necessarily developmentally disabled, but in those communities.
Yeah, I think there were. I think that was significant. Right. I know it's significant for me, and I think others felt the same way. This is a community that's seen the such huge cuts and such a needy community in terms of the services that are there, the cuts that they've had to absorb for all these bad budget years. So to get them kind of moving forward, it doesn't get them whole, but it definitely moved the ball forward very significantly.
Now, this must have been fun. In this case, the governor and the GOP were on the same page. So you were triangulating the Democrats with the governor, who's a Democrat, on debt.
Yeah.
So you got some debt service paid off.
We did.
Right?
And another thing, again, another good, look, some of that money is going to go to pay off debt, something that obviously, myself and others cared a lot about.
Right.
The governor cares a lot about. And so that was in the deal too. And I think that goes, Brad, to what I'm saying, that really this was an example, I think, of government coming together and functioning.
Bipartisanship. I mean,
exactly.
We talk about our friends in D.C. I mean, they could barely look at each other. I mean, in Sacramento,
no question.
Here's my question, though, sir. I mean, you got the debt deal, you got the developmentally disabled money, you got the MCO deal. What about transportation?
Well, I think
we're still in special session, are we?
Transportation's a separate issue.
Well, come on.
It is. It is. Look, this was about the MCO, and this was about health.
But I guess what I'm saying is,
what's going to happen?
No, but can there be bipartisanship breaking out on the transportation?
Well,
question?
Sure, there can be. I mean, I don't know.
I
don't know what's going. I did my part here. I did my part on this. This was my area. I don't have the transportation one, but it does show it can. I don't know whether it will.
I understand.
But here you have Republicans, Democrats, and Governor Brown coming together and negotiating a very complicated deal. Came together, and everybody did have to give a little bit. But at the end of the day, there was enough that everybody felt comfortable with to get a job done.
Congrats.
And it was pretty cool.
Man, you did it.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
His name is Brian Maienschein. He's a member of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance in Sacramento, local edition.